Hello, BookTube. I have a mail haul for you, the last mail haul of the week. And it's a fine pile of packages, and it ends with a box. So you're probably wondering why I have my skeptical puss on, and that's because although it's a fine pile of packages and it ends in a box, it's not setting off my Steve Spidey sense at all. Is it possible that in a mail haul like this I would get nothing that would interest me at all? I don't know. I find that hard to believe. My interests are pretty wide-ranging. So maybe that this is going to disappoint me in some other way. There's only one way to find out. We will dive in together. We'll do the first one first. It's a tiny little thing. It's the thinnest of them all. Oh. Okay, great. This is Andrea Camilleri. This is the Inspector Montalbano series. This is translated from the Italian by Stephen Sattarelli from the wonderful folks at Europa Editions. This comes out in March. This one is called The Sect of Angels. This is just a working cover, but this is what it's going to look like, a stone angel on the cover. The Sect of Angels. The lawyer and journalist Matteo Teresi discovers the existence of a secret sect whose members include priests, politicians, and regional VIPs. During the early mornings hours when the town's churches are closed, the sect of angels meet in the sacristy to carry out their holy office, initiating devout virgins into the rites of married life. Preying on their victims' naivete, the hooded elect commit ignominious acts while promising the young women divine grace. It's 1901. At a time of immense change in Sicilian society, and scandal breaks nationwide. But far from being hailed as a hero, Teresi is accused of disrupting the status quo and irrationally blamed for an outbreak of disease and a series of calamities. From the salons, churches, and social clubs of Sicily to the country's highest courts, Camilleri's novel is a fast-paced, at times funny, passionately rendered portrait of the machinations of power and the difficult destiny of a local hero. Okay. That's a little odd. Did you notice something was missing from that plot description? Inspector Montalbano was missing from that. I wonder if this is just not that. I wonder if this is just a standalone novel. I bet it is. I bet this isn't an Inspector Montalbano novel at all. Which is fine by me. Absolutely. Okay, so I'll wait for the finished copy of this. I'll get the finished copy sometime closer to the release date. That's interesting. I kept expecting Montalbano's name to come up. All right, so let's move on here. That was certainly not a disappointment. So I'm not sure why that didn't set off my Spidey sense. I mean, it's not egregious. Maybe the fact that it's not the latest in a murder mystery series that I enjoy. Maybe that's oh God. Okay. All right. All right, this is from the folks at Pegasus Press. I love them to death. This is due in May, and this is a Churchill book. This is a Churchill book, Working with Winston. Much has been written about Winston Churchill. Yes. Yes. And the important world leaders, politicians, high-ranking military personnel with whom he interacted. Now, no, don't start with that. Don't go down that road. Much has been written about Winston Churchill and every single aspect of everything to do with him, from scholarly monographs on whether or not he had piles to the personality portraits of every single animal that he ever interacted with. Everything's been written about his magazine articles, his toenail clippings, his various phobias, every aspect and period of his life in relation to society and to his government and to the world at large. There is no stone unturned. So don't go down that road. Mm-hmm. I know you're going to, though. But Churchill also required a vast staff to maintain the intense pace at which he worked, and often to do his work for him, and to cover for the many times in which he was completely insensate. And when he strode the world stage, the secretarial and support staff positions were inevitably filled by women. Though extraordinarily talented and valuable to Churchill and his work, these women remain unheralded. I knew you were going to do that. I knew you were. Intelligent and hardworking, the women who worked with Churchill were far from sycophants. Just as Churchill was no ordinary prime minister, these women were no ordinary secretaries. Indeed, in today's terms, their titles would be much grander, as their work encompassed ultra-secret documents and decrypting enemy codes. Okay, great. I can't wait to read it. I've written endlessly about Churchill for publication, and I have read endlessly for Churchill. I've read an enormous number of books about this person and every aspect of his life, and yet I keep coming back for more. So, a treasure trove of insight and research. Sita Stelzer's Working with Winston reveals the man behind the statesman and brings long overdue recognition to the quote-unquote hidden army that, like Churchill, was never off duty. Okay, well, okay, all right. You already know. I mean, I'm laughing but it's all in good fun because I never miss a Churchill book. I even read Churchill's Menagerie, the stupid book about his animals. None of whom could stand him. The reason that I'm sort of cracking wise is because you know my caution with books like this. There's virtually no person anywhere in history that evokes more hagiography than Winston Churchill, including actual saints who get lives written of them, including Jesus Christ. I honestly believe I've read more historical and biographical volumes about Jesus Christ that were critical of him than I've read books about Churchill that were critical of him. And that's, of course, what I worry about. I worry that these women are going to be starry-eyed, that he's going to be the perfect, genial, perfect boss, that there's not going to be any mention made of the fact that he took this, private army with him when he went intentionally into danger hoping to die, and told people after the fact it would have been a glorious death, and would not hear, bristled with fury, when some of his listeners were brave enough or drunk enough to say, well, it would have been a fine death for you, but what about the 4 young people you had with you? Did you even ask them before you drove them into a war zone? The man was admirable. I will read the book. It's just... I'll report back. I will review it, and I'll report back. This next one feels kind of heavy. Could be a finished copy. Oh, it is. Okay, great. It's a finished copy. Yes, indeed. And this comes out, I think, in January. Or maybe February? February. This is James Simpson's Permanent Revolution. We saw this already. This is the finished copy. Quite an eye-catching, nice thing from the Havana University Press spoke. Traditionally, liberalism has been considered a direct descendant of the 16th century Protestant and English Reformation. In its revolt against the authoritarian and corrupt Roman Catholic Church, Protestantism encouraged a liberty of consciousness, the right of every person to interpret Scripture for him or herself. Conversely, more recent, militantly secular interpretations of liberalism mark the 18th century Enlightenment as the tradition's point of origin, freeing it from the influence of prior religious cultures. So which is it? Neither, really, argues Simpson. Overturning deeply held assumptions, permanent revolution locates the origin of our liberal tradition within, not after and not despite, illiberal evangelical religion. Asserting that revolutions take 150 years to stabilize, he breaks the English Reformation into phases, an illiberal, repressive, and evangelical Reformation, followed by its complete opposite, a proto-Enlightenment Reformation. And how could one have possibly led to the disparate other? Well, I don't know, James. I don't know, because I don't think any of it's true. Our modern incarnations of liberalism stem from the Enlightenment. You discarded the correct answer in order to rush to your new hypothesis. However, I have not read the advanced copy. The author might convince me. I think that the pub sheet that we just read, which I assume was run by the author, I assume it's a fair summary of what he says, and it's hogwash. There's no need to go back to the Protestant Reformation to start wrestling it to the mat to try and squeeze out the Enlightenment, trying to squeeze out modern liberalism. Modern liberalism is completely at odds with religious fundamentalism of any kind, Protestant or Catholic. It was the Enlightenment that did it. But we shall see. I could be proven wrong. I will dig right in now that it's time, now that the year has started, now that I'm back, I will dig right in. So let's see what this next one is. Also feels heavy enough to be a finished copy. So this could be having a lot of finished copies here. I wonder if they're all from Harvard University Press. Okay, this one's from Harvard University Press. Okay, sometimes this does happen, though. This always interests me when it does. Sometimes we get finished copies of things that we did not get advanced copies of. So you get to hear me bloviate about all new things. This also comes out in February, late February. It's by Mark Osiel, and it's called The Right to Do Wrong, Morality and the Limits of Law. Once again, available at any time for any publisher, any author, any week or month at all, for free consultation services on what makes an attractive cover. Won't charge you a penny. Let's see here. What have we got here? Why do I have a feeling I'm going to argue with this thing too? And I don't know anything about it. Common morality in the form of shame, outrage, and stigma. Those are all bad things. Has always been society's first line of defense against ethical transgressions. No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't. The police. Arrest. Punishment. Mockery. The stocks. Not inner shame. not common morality. No. Social mores. Oh, God, I hate it when people use that word. No one ever uses it outside of. Social mores crucially complement the law, Mark Osiel shows, sparing us from oppressive formal regulation. Oh, who are you? Mark Osiel holds the Aliber Family Chair at the University of Iowa's College of Law. Oh, no! He lives in Iowa City. Oh, no! He regularly addresses international organizations and governments in post-conflict societies on issues of transitional justice. What on earth is a post-conflict society? One of you must enlighten me. He was the director of international and criminal and humanitarian law at the TMC Asser Institute at The Hague, and is an occasional media commentator on legal aspects of contemporary armed conflict. Okay. So he's what my generation called an egghead, but still, it doesn't even have the right to be making so many infuriating claims. What was that last infuriating claim? Social mores crucially complement the law, sparing us from an oppressive formal regulation. How much more formal can regulation get? Maybe he has to be talking about the United States. He's in Iowa, for Pete's sake. Formal regulation is pretty extensive in America. And it's that way specifically because you cannot trust morality to do the right thing. You cannot trust people's sense of shame. Who do you know who has a sense of shame anymore? That's why there are laws every single place you turn. Well, let's see. Much of what we could do, we shouldn't, and we don't. We have a free speech right to be offensive, but we know we will face outrage in response. We do it anyway. We do it anonymously all day long, every day on social media. We may declare bankruptcy, but not without stigma. Okay. Yeah. We might declare bankruptcy and be stigmatized. And if we declare bankruptcy enough times, we might be so stigmatized that we get elected President of the United States. Moral norms constantly demand more of us than the law requires. Sustaining promises we can legally break and preventing disrespectful behavior the law allows. Name me one. Name me one example of a promise you can legally break that you morally upheld. I guess there are good people in the world and the right to do wrong. Okay. The author takes up this curious interplay between lenient law and restrictive morality. I don't see where he's getting the lenient law business. I really don't. What would he think how would he think the laws could be more restrictive than they are? You so much as look at somebody cross-eyed now and you can be hauled up for assault. Showing that the law permits much wrongdoing because we assume that rights are paired with informal but enforceable duties. People will exercise their rights responsibly or else face social shaming. I am trying to think of an example here. I'm trying to think of an example of a case where social shaming would happen, or in a case where social shaming does happen, a case where it would matter to the person who had invoked it. And I'm honestly having a hard time doing that. You're walking down the street and an old woman trips and falls in front of you, and she's obviously injured herself. You step over her and keep walking. You tell yourself, I've got an important meeting to go to, and I didn't know, and I'm not her caretaker, and I'm not a health provider, and I don't want to be legally responsible if I help her and hurt her in the process. Okay, the person behind you on the sidewalk will probably think less of you, but you will never see them again, and you don't know what they think, and they certainly won't express it. I'm trying to think of I guess the book would be full of examples. It would be full of something, book 2. Where was I here? For the most part, this system has worked. Yeah, a system of public shaming has definitely worked. Yeah. No, it hasn't. Obviously, it hasn't. Because when the public finds, for instance, to use an obvious low-hanging fruit of the Trump administration, when the public finds an official of the Trump administration eating in a public place and mocks them out the door, jeers at them at their table until they're forced to leave, citing as their reason for doing that the Trump administration has let little children die in concentration camps on American soil, it's the shamers who are shamed on social media, not the shamed. So, in other words, the moral that's being upheld is not... Social order persists despite ample opportunities for reprehensible conduct, testifying to the decisive constraints common morality imposes on the way we exercise our legal prerogatives. The right to do wrong collects vivid case studies, I figured, and social science research to explore how resistance to the exercise of rights picks up where law leaves off and shapes the legal system in turn. Building on recent evidence that declining social trust leads to increasing reliance on law, Ossio contends that as social changes produce strong assertions of individual rights, it becomes more difficult to depend on informal tempering of our unfettered freedoms. Social norms. Common morality. This pub sheet is, I just realized, this pub sheet is going out of its way, and I mean way out of its way. It's herniating itself to avoid mentioning religion. It's going out of its way not to name the source of that common morality, the source of that public shaming, which for 210 years in the United States history was religion. It wasn't just that we all just sort of nebulously came to the right idea about common morality, about shame. What was it? Shame, outrage, and stigma? Is that we were told what those things were, and we were told where they came from. I wonder what role religion is going to play in this book. Okay. Well, all right. You have done your job. Now I want to read this book very badly. This comes out on February 25th. I'm obviously not going to get the kick in the pants of getting a finished copy, so I'm going to read this now. I will just read this tonight. There's nothing I like better than a good sinus-clearing argument with an author, especially someone who's living in Iowa City, where I wish I were living. Except there's no Brattle there. So let's move on here. What's this next one? Oh no! Okay, this is a January book, but we just saw it. This is okay. This is just a mix-up. This does happen. This is the post-war moment. Finished copy of the post-war moment. This is now a double. And then we get to the box. What is this box? I honestly don't think there'll be any more mail today. Could be wrong about that. I tell you, when a package, box especially, is being recalcitrant, that's one of the times when it really helps to have no sense of touch. You can just rip into it. You don't have to worry about it going, that hurt. Oh my. Okay. Did we get a book on this subject before? I don't think it was this book, though. This comes out in March. No, it couldn't have been this book. This is by Cesar Brioso, and it is Last Seasons in Havana, the Castro Revolution, and the End of Professional Baseball in Cuba. Look at that cover. He's got a machine gun. Oh. This book explores the intersection between Cuba and America's pastime for the late 1950s to the early 1960s. When Fidel Castro overthrew Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista, Cesar Brioso takes the reader through the triumph of the Revolution of 1959 and its impact on professional baseball in the seasons immediately following Castro's rise to power. Baseball in pre-Castro Cuba was enjoying a golden age. The Cuban League, which had been founded in 1878, just 2 years after the formation of the National League, was thriving under the auspices of organized baseball. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, players from the major leagues, minor leagues, and Negro leagues had come to Cuba to play in the country's wholly integrated Winter Baseball League. We saw a book about that integrated league, about Cuba, baseball in Cuba, during that time. I know I did. Maybe not on camera. Cuban teams had come to dominate the annual Caribbean Series tournament, and Havana had joined the highest levels of minor league baseball, fielding the Havana Sugar Kings of the Class AAA International League. Confidence was high that Havana might one day have a major league team of its own. But professional baseball became one of the many victims of Castro's communist revolution. American players stopped participating in the Cuban League, and Cuban teams moved to an amateur state-sponsored model. And this book is all about that. Last seasons in Havana. Okay. I'm not the biggest baseball fan in the world, but this is interesting. Okay, well, aside from a good argument, I think my reflexes were correct. There were no Steve books in here. Interesting stuff. Like this, for instance. I don't usually jump right into baseball books, but that sounds fascinating enough. The post-war moment, I know already that I like. The Right to Do Wrong is the very first thing I will read tonight. Permanent Revolution, in a finished copy. Working with Winston, another Winston Churchill book. And The Sect of Angels, a Camilleri book that is not an Inspector Montalbano novel. So an interesting mail haul, our last mail haul of the week. But I see now why why it wasn't really doing anything for me. That's okay, though. That's okay. And there's also the fact that my instincts could be wrong. That happens all the time. So it could be that one of these books will blow me away. It could be that The Right to Do Wrong will blow me away. I don't know. I'll find out. But in the meantime, I'll wrap this up before we go much longer. But I will see you soon. We have plenty more bookish stuff to talk about. Thank you, BookTube.